She was nothing, a ghost in servant's rags, until the night a dying queen named her, and a cursed king was forced to choose between his throne and his life. Welcome back to our channel. Today's story will take you 2 hours deep into a world where power devours the weak, where ancient curses decide who lives and who dies, and where one invisible girl will shatter every rule to save the man who rejected her in front of everyone. If you love stories of survival, forbidden bonds, and characters who refuse to stay broken, this one's for you. Stick around until the end to see how it all unfolds. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. Let's see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's begin. The Grand Hall smelled like roasted venison, imported wine, and the kind of wealth Era Callan would never touch. She moved along the outer edge of the banquet like a shadow, silver tray balanced in both hands, eyes down, breathing shallow. That was the trick. Stay low. Stay quiet. Don't let them notice you. She'd learned that lesson young. The nobles didn't look at servants, they looked through them, and that was fine. Era had spent the last 8 years perfecting the art of being nobody. No name worth remembering, no face worth a second glance, just hands that poured wine and feet that knew when to step back. Tonight was the king's anniversary celebration. 50 years since the Varick bloodline took the throne. The hall was packed with alphas from every corner of the realm, lords in embroidered cloaks, ladies dripping in silver and moonstone, their scents heavy with dominance and entitlement. Era kept her head down and her wolf buried deep. She'd learned to smother her own instincts so well that most days she barely felt like a wolf at all. Better that way. She refilled a goblet without being asked, stepped back before the lord even turned, and slipped toward the kitchens. But as she reached the servants' corridor, a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Stop!" Era froze. The word hadn't been loud, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that made the entire hall go still. She turned slowly, tray trembling in her grip. At the high table, the Queen Mother had risen from her seat. Era's stomach dropped. The Queen Mother was ancient. No one knew exactly how old. Her hair was white as frost, her eyes pale gold, and her presence alone could silence a room. She was the king's grandmother, the last living remnant of the old bloodline, and she rarely spoke. When she did, people listened. Now those pale eyes were locked on Era. "Come here, girl." Era's throat closed. She glanced toward the kitchens, but there was no escape. Every eye in the hall had turned. She set the tray down on a side table with shaking hands and walked forward. Each step felt like walking toward a cliff edge. The Queen Mother didn't blink. She just watched, head tilted slightly, as if she were seeing something no one else could. When Era reached the base of the dais, she dropped into a low bow. "Your Majesty." "Look at me." Era's pulse hammered. Slowly, she raised her head. The Queen Mother stepped down from the dais. She moved like someone who had all the time in the world. When she stopped in front of Era, she reached out and took her chin in one cold hand, tilting her face toward the light. Era didn't breathe. The hall was silent. "What is your name?" the Queen Mother asked. "Era Callan, Your Majesty." "Callan." The Queen's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I knew a Callan once, long ago." Her thumb brushed Era's jaw and her eyes narrowed. "You carry something old in your blood, girl, something most have forgotten." Era's heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know what the Queen saw. But she could feel the weight of every stare pressing down on her like stones. Then the Queen Mother turned toward the high table, toward the king. "This one," she said clearly, "is your true mate." The hall erupted. Voices rose in shock, disbelief, laughter. Era's knees nearly buckled. She stared at the Queen, unable to process the words, unable to understand what had just been said. True mate. No, that wasn't possible. She looked up at the high table, and for the first time she met the eyes of Alpha King Lucien Varick. He sat at the center of the table, perfectly still. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, maybe less. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes like cold steel. He wore black and silver, no crown, no ornament. He didn't need them. His presence alone commanded the room, and right now, that presence was focused entirely on her. His expression didn't change. No shock, no recognition, Nothing. He just looked at her like she was an insect that had wandered onto his plate. Then he spoke. His voice was low, controlled, and absolutely final. No. The word cut through the noise like a blade. The hall went silent again. Lucien rose from his seat. He didn't look at the Queen Mother. He looked at Era. I don't know what game this is, he said quietly, but it ends now. He gestured toward the guards. Remove her. Era's chest tightened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted this. She'd been invisible her whole life, and now, 2 guards stepped forward, hands on her arms. Wait, she managed, but they were already pulling her back. The Queen Mother didn't move. She just watched, expression unreadable. Era stumbled as the guards dragged her toward the side exit. The nobles were laughing now, whispering. Someone called her a beggar. Someone else called her worse. She kept her eyes down, face burning, and let them pull her out. The doors slammed shut behind her. Era sat alone in the servants' quarters, hands still shaking. The other servants had scattered the moment she'd returned. No one wanted to be near her, not after what had happened, not after the queen had named her in front of everyone. True mate. The words felt like a curse. She pressed her palms against her knees and forced herself to breathe. It didn't make sense. She wasn't anyone. She'd spent her whole life making sure of that. She had no family, no pack, no bloodline worth mentioning. Her parents had been low-ranking wolves who'd died in a border skirmish when she was 10. She'd been taken in by the palace as a ward, which was just a polite word for charity case. She'd worked. She'd kept her head down. She'd survived. And now this. She didn't even know what a true mate was supposed to feel like. She'd never had a bond, never even felt the pull people talked about. When she'd looked at the king, she'd felt nothing, fear maybe, but not the bond. So why had the queen said it? Era buried her face in her hands. A knock sounded at the door. She jerked upright, heart racing. Open it. The voice was male, calm, unfamiliar. Era stood slowly and crossed to the door. She cracked it open. A man stood in the hallway. Older, maybe 50, with graying hair and a long coat marked with the royal insignia. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. Era Callan? She nodded. You're to come with me. Where? The king has summoned you. Her stomach dropped. I don't understand. He rejected? Now, the man said, not unkindly, but firmly. Era swallowed and stepped into the hall. The man led her through corridors she'd never walked before. These weren't the servants' passages. These were the private halls of the royal wing, polished stone floors, tapestries on the walls, silence thick as fog. They stopped in front of a heavy oak door. The man knocked once, then opened it. Inside, he said. Era stepped through. The room was smaller than she'd expected. A study, maybe. Shelves lined with books, a desk near the window, a fire burning low in the hearth. And standing in front of the fire, arms crossed, was the king. Lucien didn't turn when she entered. He just stared into the flames. The door closed behind her. Era stood frozen near the entrance, hands clasped in front of her. She didn't know if she was supposed to bow, didn't know if she was supposed to speak. Sit, Lucien said. She glanced around. There was a chair near the desk. She moved toward it carefully and sat, spine straight, hands folded. Lucien finally turned. He looked tired. That was the first thing she noticed. Not angry, not cold, just tired. Do you know why I called you here? He asked. Era shook her head. He studied her for a long moment, then moved to the desk and leaned against it, arms still crossed. The Queen Mother, he said slowly, does not make mistakes. She also does not lie. Era's throat tightened. Which means, Lucien continued, that whatever she saw in you, whatever she believes, is real. He paused. But I need you to understand something. I don't want a mate. I don't need a mate. And I sure as hell don't need the court tearing itself apart over a servant girl with no name and no pack. The words stung, but Era kept her face neutral. So here's what's going to happen, Lucien said. You and I are going to make a deal. Era blinked. A deal? You marry me. Her heart stopped. You wear the crown. You stand beside me when required. You play the role. His eyes didn't waver. But we don't bond. We don't claim each other. We don't pretend this is anything more than what it is, a political arrangement. Era stared at him. You want me to marry you after you just rejected me in front of the entire court? Yes. Why? Lucien's jaw tightened. Because if I don't, the court will tear you apart. They'll call you a liar, a fraud. They'll make an example of you. He leaned forward slightly. But if you're my wife, if you have my name, they can't touch you. And what do you get out of this? Era asked quietly. Lucien's expression flickered, just for a second. Then it smoothed over. Stability, he said. The Queen Mother's word carries weight. If I refuse her completely, the court will fracture. But if I marry you and keep the bond at arm's length, I keep control. Era's mind spun. This was insane. All of it. And if I say no, she asked. Lucien straightened. Then you go back to the kitchens, and in a week, maybe 2, someone will find a reason to remove you from the palace entirely. His voice was flat. You'll disappear, and no one will ask questions. Era's hands clenched in her lap. He wasn't threatening her. He was just stating facts. So, Lucien said, do we have a deal? Era looked up at him. At this man who'd rejected her in public and was now offering her a crown in private. At this cold, controlled king who looked at her like she was a problem to be managed. She should have said no. She should have run. But she thought about the servants' quarters, the whispers, the way people had looked at her tonight. She thought about disappearing, and she realized she'd been disappearing her whole life. Yes, she said quietly. Lucien nodded once. Good. He turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing, he said without looking back. Don't fall in love with me, it won't end well. Then he left. Era sat alone in the study, heart pounding, and wondered what she'd just agreed to. The wedding happened 3 days later. It wasn't a celebration. It was a ceremony, cold, efficient, witnessed by the Queen Mother, a handful of council members, and no one else. Era wore a dress someone had pulled from storage, silver and white, too loose in the shoulders, too tight at the waist. No one had asked her opinion. No one had asked her anything. She stood beside Lucien in the palace chapel, hands folded, and repeated the words the officiant told her to say. Lucien's voice was steady. Hers shook. When it was over, he didn't kiss her. He just nodded once, turned, and walked out. Era stood there, a gold band on her finger, and felt nothing. The court didn't take it well. Within a week, the whispers started. Some called her a schemer. Others called her a witch. A few claimed she'd seduced the king with dark magic. No one believed the Queen Mother's claim. No one thought Era was worthy. And Lucien didn't defend her. He appeared at formal events with her beside him, silent and composed. He introduced her as his queen. He gave her a title, a wing of the palace, a seat at the high table. But he never touched her, never spoke to her unless required, never looked at her like she was anything more than a piece on a board. Era learned quickly. She attended councils and said nothing. She sat through banquets and smiled when expected. She wore the crown and played the part. And at night, she returned to her chambers alone. Lucien's rooms were on the opposite side of the palace. It was exactly what he'd promised, a marriage in name only. But Era couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the coldness. It was the exhaustion she saw in Lucien's face when he thought no one was looking. The way his hands sometimes trembled before he clenched them into fists. The way he dismissed his advisors early and disappeared into his study for hours. She didn't know what it meant, but she started paying attention. 2 weeks after the wedding, Era found herself in the palace library. She wasn't supposed to be there. Technically, queens had access to everything, but Era still thought of herself as a servant, still moved like one. She was looking for something to read, something to fill the long, silent hours. That's when she saw it. A book on the restricted shelf, old leather binding, no title on the spine. She pulled it down carefully and opened it. The pages were handwritten, a journal maybe, or a record. She skimmed the first few entries. Names she didn't recognize, dates from decades ago. Then she found a passage that made her stop cold. The curse of the Varric line is absolute. Any mate claimed by the bloodline will die within the year. The bond itself is poison. Only the unmated survive. Era's hands went numb. She flipped forward. More entries. More deaths. Mates who'd been claimed and bonded, dead within months. Some from illness, some from accidents, some from nothing at all. The last entry was dated 5 years ago. Lucien Varric has refused all attempts at bonding. The line will end with him unless a solution is found. Era closed the book slowly. Her chest felt tight. Lucien wasn't cold because he didn't care. He was cold because he was dying, and if he bonded with her, if he claimed her as his true mate, the curse would kill them both. Era stood in the empty library, the book heavy in her hands, and realized the truth. The deal wasn't meant to protect her. It was meant to keep her alive. Era didn't sleep that night. She lay in the oversized bed in her chambers, staring at the ceiling, the journal's words burned into her mind. The bond itself is poison. Every mate claimed by the Varric line had died. Not some. All of them. And Lucien knew. He'd known the entire time. That's why he'd rejected her in front of the court. That's why he'd offered the deal. He wasn't protecting his pride or his throne. He was protecting her life. And his own. She rolled onto her side, pulled the blanket tighter. The room was cold despite the fire. Everything in this palace was cold. By dawn, she'd made a decision. She needed to know more. And if Lucien wouldn't tell her, she'd find out herself. The palace archives were in the eastern wing, buried 2 floors below ground. Era had never been down there. Servants didn't have access, and queens weren't supposed to care about dusty records from centuries past. But no one stopped her when she walked through the corridors that morning. Guards nodded. Servants stepped aside. The crown on her head was a key that opened every door. She hated how much she liked that. The archive door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and lamp oil. Shelves stretched into the shadows, packed with leather-bound volumes, scrolls tied with ribbon, boxes stacked in uneven towers. Era lit a candle and started searching. It took her 3 hours to find what she was looking for. A record book. Thin, brittle pages. Dated back nearly 200 years. She set it on a reading table and carefully turned the pages, scanning names, dates, causes of death. There it was. Mira Varric. Bonded to Alpha King Davion Varric. Died 6 months later. Cause. Unknown wasting illness. Isla Harn. Bonded to Alpha Prince Matthias Varric. Died 8 months later. Cause. Sudden heart failure. Celeste Thorne. Bonded to Alpha King Gareth Varric. Died 4 months later. Cause. Fall from tower window. The list went on. Page after page. Every woman who'd bonded with a Varric Alpha. Every single one dead within a year. Era's hands shook as she turned the final page. And there at the bottom was a note written in different handwriting. Shakier. Desperate. The curse cannot be broken by refusal. It cannot be broken by distance. The only known counter is absorption, a vessel capable of containing death itself. But no such power has been seen in 3 generations. The Varric line is ending. Era read it twice. Absorption. A vessel capable of containing death. She didn't know what that meant, but she was going to find out. That afternoon, Era attended her first formal council meeting. She'd been invited before, but she'd always declined. She wasn't a politician. She didn't know the language of power. But today, she needed to be in that room. She needed to watch Lucien, needed to see if anyone else knew about the curse. The council chamber was a long room with a table at the center and high-backed chairs arranged around it. 12 council members, all older, all male except for one woman, a sharp-eyed beta named Corinne, who served as the kingdom's trade minister. Lucien sat at the head of the table. When Era entered, every head turned. She kept her face calm and took the empty seat to Lucien's right. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't even glance in her direction. "Let's continue," he said. The meeting resumed. They discussed grain shortages in the northern provinces. Border patrols. A dispute between 2 minor lords over a river boundary. Era listened, didn't speak, just watched. And she noticed something. Halfway through the meeting, Lucien's hand trembled as he reached for a water glass. He set it down quickly, fingers curling into a fist, his jaw tightened. Sweat beaded at his temple despite the cool air. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. The meeting dragged on for another hour. By the end, Lucian's face was pale. He stood, dismissed the council with a curt nod, and left the room without a word. Era waited until the others filed out. Then she followed him. She caught up to him in the corridor outside his study. Lucien. He stopped but didn't turn. Go back to your chambers, Era. I need to talk to you. No, you don't. She stepped closer. I found the journal in the library and the records in the archive. That made him turn. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, dangerous. You went through restricted records. I'm the queen, Era said. I can go anywhere. That doesn't mean you should. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice came out harder than she meant. Why didn't you tell me about the curse? Lucian's jaw worked. He glanced down the corridor, then pushed open the door to his study and gestured for her to follow. She did. He closed the door and turned to face her, arms crossed. Because it wasn't your problem, he said flatly. I'm your wife. On paper. And what happens when you collapse in the middle of a council meeting? Era shot back. What happens when the court sees you dying and realizes the line ends with you? Lucian's eyes narrowed. That's not your concern. Yes, it is. She stepped closer. You married me to buy time, to keep the court stable. But you're running out of time, aren't you? He didn't answer. Era took a breath. How long do you have? Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to the window, hands braced against the sill. A year, he said quietly. Maybe less. Her chest tightened. And if you bond with me, we both die. His voice was flat, final. The curse doesn't care about intent. It doesn't care about love or politics. The moment I claim you, it starts, and it doesn't stop until we're both dead. Era's throat burned. So what's the plan? You just wait? I'm looking for a solution. And if you don't find one? Lucien turned to look at her. His expression was harder now, colder. Then I die, he said simply. And the throne passes to the next bloodline. The court fractures. The kingdom tears itself apart. And you, he paused, you get to walk away. No bond. No claim. You survive. Era stared at him. He wasn't being cruel. He genuinely believed this was the best option. You're an idiot, she said. Lucien blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. She crossed her arms. You think dying alone is noble? You think letting the kingdom fall apart is better than trying? There's nothing to try, Lucien said sharply. I've spent 5 years searching for a way to break this curse. I've consulted every healer, every scholar, every old bloodline with knowledge of ancient magic. There is no solution. The curse is absolute. What about absorption? Lucien froze. Era pulled the journal from her coat pocket, the one she'd taken from the library, and flipped to the final page. She held it up. It says here the only counter is a vessel capable of containing death, she said. What does that mean? Lucian's face went carefully blank. Where did you get that? The library, restricted section. You shouldn't have that. But I do. She set the journal on his desk. So tell me, what's absorption? Lucien stared at the journal like it was a live snake. Then he sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. It's a theory, he said finally. An old one. The idea that certain wolves are born with the ability to absorb curses, poisons, dark magic, anything that would normally kill. They act as containers, vessels. And it's a myth. Lucien's voice was tired. No one's seen a vessel in over a century. Most scholars think they never existed in the first place. Era frowned. But if they did, they don't. But if they did, she pressed, they could break the curse. Lucien looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold control in his eyes. Exhaustion. Desperation. Hope he didn't want to feel. Yes, he said quietly. If they existed. If one bonded with me and absorbed the curse before it killed us both. Then, theoretically, we'd survive. Era's heart pounded. How would you know? She asked. If someone was a vessel? Lucian shook his head. You wouldn't. Not unless they tried to absorb something and survived. He paused. Why are you asking? Era hesitated. She thought about the whispers that had followed her since childhood, the way people avoided her, the way her wolf felt wrong, too quiet, too empty, like a void instead of a presence. She thought about the servants who'd called her cursed, and she thought about the Queen Mother's words. You carry something old in your blood. No reason, Era said finally. Lucian studied her, then turned back to the window. Go back to your chambers, Era, he said, and stay out of the archives. She wanted to argue, wanted to push, but she didn't. She just picked up the journal, tucked it back into her coat, and left. The court didn't trust her. That became painfully clear over the next 2 weeks. She attended dinners where nobles spoke around her like she wasn't there. She sat through council meetings where her presence was tolerated but her voice ignored. She walked through the palace halls and heard the whispers start the moment she passed. Schemer, opportunist, fake. One evening, she overheard 2 council members talking outside the dining hall. She's a distraction, one of them said. The king should have chosen someone with an actual bloodline. He didn't choose her, the other replied. The Queen Mother forced his hand, and now we're stuck with a servant playing queen. Era kept walking. She didn't let them see her face, but that night, alone in her chambers, she let herself feel it. The anger, the shame, the weight of being unwanted. She'd spent her whole life invisible, and now she was visible in the worst possible way. 3 weeks after the wedding, Era was summoned to the Queen Mother's chambers. She hadn't seen the queen since the banquet, hadn't spoken to her. Part of Era had hoped the old woman had forgotten about her entirely. But when the guard delivered the message, there was no mistaking the order. Era climbed the tower stairs to the Queen Mother's private wing. The door was open when she arrived. Come in, child. Era stepped inside. The room was warm. A fire burned in the hearth, and the walls were lined with shelves holding strange objects, stones, bones, dried herbs tied in bundles. The Queen Mother sat in a chair by the fire, a blanket over her lap, her pale eyes fixed on Era. Sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Era sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the Queen Mother smiled faintly. You've been busy. Era's stomach tightened. I don't know what you mean. The archives, the library, the questions you've been asking. The Queen's smile widened. You're searching for answers. Era's throat went dry. How did you... I'm old, child, not blind. The Queen leaned forward slightly. Tell me, what have you learned? Era hesitated. Then she decided there was no point in lying. The curse, she said quietly. Every mate who bonds with a Varric dies, and Lucien's running out of time. The Queen Mother nodded slowly. And the only way to break it is through absorption, a vessel. Clever girl. The Queen sat back. And do you know what a vessel is? Someone who can contain death. Not just death, the Queen corrected. Darkness, poison, curses, anything meant to destroy. She paused. They're born, not made. And they're exceedingly rare. Era's pulse hammered. Do they still exist? The Queen Mother's eyes glinted. What do you think? Era's breath caught. The Queen wasn't asking a hypothetical. She was asking her. I don't know, Era whispered. Liar. The word was soft, but it hit like a slap. The Queen Mother leaned forward, her gaze sharp as a blade. You've felt it your whole life, haven't you? She said. That emptiness, that void inside you. People called you cursed, called you wrong. But you were never cursed, child. Era's hands clenched in her lap. You were born to contain what others cannot, the Queen continued. You are a vessel, the first I've seen in 70 years. Era's chest felt too tight. She couldn't breathe. No, she managed. That's not... It is. The Queen Mother's voice was firm, and deep down, you already know. Era stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I'm not, her voice cracked. I can't be. Why not? Because I'm nobody. The words burst out of her. I'm a servant. I'm nothing. I don't have power. I don't have... You have exactly what you need, the queen interrupted. You've just been taught to bury it. Era shook her head, backing toward the door. The queen mother watched her with something that might have been pity. You can run from this, child, she said quietly, or you can accept it, but the curse won't wait. Era turned and fled, perturbed. She didn't go back to her chambers. She didn't know where to go. She ended up in the palace gardens, pacing between the bare trees, breath coming in short gasps. A vessel. It couldn't be true. But the more she thought about it, the more the pieces fit. The emptiness inside her, the way she'd never felt her wolf the way others did, the way people had always looked at her like she was wrong. She stopped walking and pressed her hands to her face. If it was true, if she really was a vessel, then she could save him. She could break the curse. But the thought terrified her. What if she tried and failed? What if she absorbed the curse and it killed her? What if... Era! She spun around. Lucian stood at the edge of the garden, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. What are you doing out here? He asked. I needed air. He studied her for a moment, then stepped closer. You saw the Queen Mother. It wasn't a question. Era nodded. What did she tell you? Era looked away. Nothing, just palace gossip. You're a terrible liar. She let out a shaky laugh. I know. Lucian moved to stand beside her. For a moment, they just stood there in the cold, the silence stretching between them. Then he spoke. You don't have to do this, you know. Era frowned. Do what? Stay. He kept his eyes on the horizon. You fulfilled the bargain. You married me. You gave the court what they needed to see. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. Her chest tightened. You're trying to get rid of me? I'm giving you a choice. Why? Lucien finally looked at her, and for the first time she saw past the walls he kept up, saw the exhaustion, the guilt. Because you deserve better than this, he said quietly. Era's throat burned. What if I don't want better? She said. What if I want to stay? Lucien's jaw tightened. Why would you? Because... She stopped, took a breath. Because I'm tired of running. I've spent my whole life disappearing, and I'm done. Lucian stared at her. Even if it kills you? He asked. Era met his eyes. Even then. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Lucian turned and walked away, shoulders tense, hands clenched at his sides. And Era stood alone in the garden, heart pounding, knowing she'd just made a choice she couldn't take back. The next morning, Era woke to shouting in the corridors. She sat up, heart already racing. The voices were sharp, urgent. Footsteps pounded past her door. She threw off the blankets, grabbed a robe, and stepped into the hall. A guard rushed past, barely glancing at her. What's happening? She called after him. He didn't answer. Era followed the noise. It led her to the council chamber, where a crowd had gathered outside the doors. Nobles, advisors, guards, all of them tense, whispering. She pushed through. Inside, the council was already assembled. And at the head of the table, Lucien sat slumped in his chair, face ashen, one hand gripping the armrest like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Era's stomach dropped. What happened? She demanded. Every head turned. Corinne, the trade minister, stepped forward. Her expression was tight. The king collapsed during his morning briefing. We're waiting for the healer. Collapsed? Era moved toward the table. How long ago? 10 minutes. Era reached Lucian's side. Up close he looked worse. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His breathing was shallow, uneven. His eyes were half closed, unfocused. Lucian, she said quietly. He didn't respond. She turned to Corinne. Where's the healer? On his way. That's not good enough. Era's voice came out sharper than she meant. Get him now. Corinne hesitated, then nodded and sent a guard running. Era crouched beside Lucian's chair. She reached for his hand. It was ice cold. She wrapped both of hers around it, trying to warm it, trying to do something. Lucien, she said again, can you hear me? His eyes flickered, focused on her for just a second. Era, he whispered. His voice was barely there. I'm here. You shouldn't be. Shut up. A faint smile touched his lips. Then his eyes rolled back and his body went slack. Era's breath caught. No, 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 no. The doors burst open. The healer rushed in, an older man with gray hair and a leather bag slung over his shoulder. He moved to Lucian's side, pushed Era back gently but firmly, and started examining him. Era stepped away, hands shaking. The council watched in silence. The healer checked Lucian's pulse, his breathing, his eyes. Then he straightened and turned to face the room. The curse is accelerating, he said flatly. His body's shutting down. I can stabilize him for now, but... He paused. Days. Maybe a week. No more than that. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Panic, anger, accusations. Someone said they needed to call an emergency session. Someone else said the bloodline was finished. Era didn't hear any of it. She just stared at Lucian's unconscious face and felt the ground fall out from under her. They moved him to his chambers. The healer stayed with him, administering tinctures, checking his vitals. Era stood in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, and watched. She didn't leave. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Servants brought food she didn't touch. Guards came and went with updates from the council. She ignored all of it. Finally, near midnight, Lucien's eyes opened. Era was at his side in an instant. Don't move, she said. He blinked slowly, then focused on her. You're still here. Where else would I be? Anywhere but this room. She pulled a chair closer and sat down. How do you feel? Like I'm dying. He said it without humor, just fact. Era's throat tightened. The healer said days, maybe a week. Lucian's jaw worked. I know. So what do we do? We? He turned his head to look at her. There's no we, Era. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. No. His voice was firm despite the weakness. You're going to leave. Tonight. I'll have a carriage prepared. You'll go to the western provinces. I'll send money, a new name, everything you need to start over. Era stared at him. You're not serious. I am. Lucienne, you don't belong in this palace, he said. You never did. And when I'm gone, the vultures will tear you apart. So you're leaving. Now. Era stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Era. No. She leaned over him, hands braced on the armrests of his bed. You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide I'm not strong enough or brave enough or whatever the hell you think I'm not. Lucian's eyes flashed. This isn't about strength. It's about survival. Then let me survive my way. Your way will get you killed. Maybe. She didn't blink. But it's my choice. Lucien stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he closed his eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. You're impossible, he muttered. I know. He opened his eyes again, and this time there was something different in them, something softer. Why? He asked quietly. Why do you care? Era hesitated. She could have lied, could have said it was duty or obligation or politics. But she didn't. Because you're the first person who didn't treat me like I was broken, she said. Even when you were cold, even when you pushed me away. You never looked at me like I was cursed. Lucien's expression shifted, just slightly. You're not cursed, he said. I know. She straightened. I'm a vessel. The room went silent. Lucien's eyes widened. What? The Queen Mother told me. Era crossed her arms. She said I was born to contain what others can't. That's why I felt empty my whole life. That's why people thought I was wrong. Lucian pushed himself up on his elbows. Era, you can't... I can, she interrupted. And I'm going to. No. Yes. You don't know what you're talking about. His voice was sharp now, desperate. Absorbing a curse isn't like healing a wound. It's not something you just do. It could kill you. It probably will. Then I die trying. She met his eyes. But I'm not running, not this time. Lucian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. Era, I've made my choice, she said firmly. Now you need to make yours. Do you trust me or not? Lucien's jaw clenched, his hands fisted in the blankets. Then finally, he spoke. I trust you. Era's breath caught. But I don't trust the curse, he added. And if this goes wrong, if you die because of me, I won't. You don't know that. No, she admitted. But I know I'm not leaving, so you can either help me figure this out, or you can lie there and argue. Your choice. Lucien let out a bitter laugh. You really are impossible. Glad we agree. He closed his eyes, rubbed a hand over his face, then looked at her again. Fine, he said. But we do this carefully. We research. We prepare. We don't just... Lucienne. Era's voice was quiet. We don't have time for careful. He knew she was right. They both did. The next 2 days were a blur. Era and Lucien worked in secret. They pulled every book on vessels, curses, and ancient magic from the restricted archives. They studied diagrams, read accounts, tried to piece together how absorption actually worked. The problem was simple. No one knew. The records were vague, theoretical. Most scholars believed vessels were a myth. The few who didn't had no practical knowledge, no instructions, no guidance. Era read until her eyes burned. Lucien grew weaker by the hour. The healer came and went, shaking his head each time. On the third day, the council called an emergency session. Ira attended. Lucien didn't. He was too weak to leave his bed. The moment she entered the chamber, she knew it was going to be bad. 12 council members, all of them staring at her like she was the problem. Corinne stood at the head of the table. Your Majesty, she said, not kindly. We need to discuss the succession. Era's stomach tightened. The king is still alive. Barely. The voice came from Lord Tyron, a hawk-faced alpha who'd never bothered to hide his disdain for her. And when he dies, the throne passes. The question is, to whom? That's not for us to decide, Era said carefully. It is if the king is incapacitated. Tyron leaned forward. And he is. So we need a plan. The plan is to save him. Laughter rippled through the room. Era's face burned. With all due respect, Your Majesty, Corinne said, there is no saving him. The curse is absolute. We've known that for generations. Then we break it. More laughter. You can't break a curse that's lasted 200 years, Tyron said. And even if you could, you don't have the knowledge or the power. Era's hands clenched under the table. I'm working on it, she said tightly. Working on what? Tyron's voice was mocking now. Playing healer, reading dusty books? You're a servant girl, not a miracle worker. I'm the queen. You're a placeholder. Tyron stood. And once the king dies, you'll be nothing again. The words hit like a slap. Era stood too, chair scraping back. Careful, Lord Tyron, she said quietly. You're addressing your queen. I'm addressing a fraud. The room went silent. Era's heart pounded. She wanted to lunge across the table, wanted to scream, wanted to prove him wrong. But she didn't. She just turned and walked out. She went straight to Lucien's chambers. He was awake, propped up against pillows, a book open in his lap. He looked up when she entered. How was the council? He asked. Awful. He closed the book. What happened? Era sat down on the edge of the bed. They want to plan the succession. They think you're already dead. Lucien's expression didn't change. They're not wrong. Don't say that. Era, I said don't. She looked at him. We're running out of time, so I need you to tell me the truth. How does bonding work? Lucien frowned. What? The bond. The claim. How do you do it? His face went carefully blank. Why are you asking? Because I need to know. Era, just tell me. Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. It's instinct, he said. When two mates recognize each other, the bond forms naturally. You don't have to think about it. You just feel it. And the claim? A bite, usually at the throat or shoulder. It marks the bond permanently. Era's pulse quickened. And once it's done, the curse activates? Yes. How long does it take? Days? Maybe hours. It varies. He paused. Why are you asking? Era didn't answer. She was thinking. If the bond activated the curse, and if she was a vessel, then the moment Lucien claimed her, the curse would transfer. She'd absorb it, contain it, or die trying. Era. Lucien's voice was sharp now. What are you planning? She met his eyes. I'm going to complete the bond. Lucien went rigid. No. Yes. Absolutely not. Lucien, I won't do it. His voice was firm, final. I won't claim you. I won't risk your life for mine. It's not your choice. Yes, it is. Era stood. You're dying. The curse is killing you right now, and the only way to stop it is to transfer it to me. And if it kills you, then I die. She said it calmly, like it was simple. But at least I'll have tried. Lucien's face twisted. You think I can live with that? You think I can watch you die and you won't have to watch? Era leaned closer. Because I'm not going to die. You don't know that. No, she admitted, but I believe it, and right now, belief is all we have. Lucien stared at her. His hands shook. Please, he whispered, don't ask me to do this. Era's chest ached. She reached out and took his hand. I'm not asking, she said gently. I'm telling you, this is happening, with or without your permission. Lucien's eyes closed. A single tear slid down his cheek, and Era knew she'd won. Fun. They decided to do it that night. No ceremony, no witnesses, just the two of them in his chambers, the fire burning low, the world outside silent. Era sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. Her heart was racing, but her mind was calm. Lucien stood by the window, back turned. You can still change your mind, he said. I won't. Era, stop stalling. He turned to look at her. His face was pale, drawn, but his eyes were clear. If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, he continued, I need you to know. He stopped, swallowed hard. I need you to know I didn't want this, any of it, but if I had to be stuck with someone, he paused. I'm glad it was you. Era's throat burned. Lucien, don't. He crossed the room and sat beside her. Just let me say it. You're braver than anyone I've ever met, stronger, and I don't deserve you. Era's hands trembled. You're wrong. I'm not. You are. She turned to face him. You gave me a crown when I had nothing. You gave me a choice when no one else would. You treated me like I mattered. Lucien's jaw tightened. You do matter, he said quietly. Era's breath caught. Then, before she could think, before she could stop herself, she leaned forward and kissed him. Lucien froze. Then he kissed her back. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful. It was desperate and messy and real. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Ready? Era whispered. Lucien's hand came up to cup her face. No, he said. But let's do it anyway. He leaned in. His mouth brushed her throat just above the collarbone. Then he bit down. Pain flared, sharp, immediate. Era gasped, hands fisting in his shirt. And then the curse hit. It wasn't subtle. It was a tidal wave. A roaring darkness that slammed into her chest and spread like fire through her veins. Every nerve screamed. Her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. She heard Lucien's voice, distant and panicked. Era! But she couldn't answer. The darkness was inside her now, cold and suffocating and hungry. It wanted to consume her, wanted to tear her apart from the inside out. And for a moment she thought it would. But then, the void inside her opened, not breaking, not shattering, opening. The curse poured into it like water into a well. And instead of drowning, Era felt it settle, felt it anchor, felt the emptiness she'd carried her whole life finally make sense. She wasn't broken. She was built for this. The pain didn't stop, but it changed. It became bearable, controllable. Era opened her eyes. Lucien was kneeling in front of her, face white, hands gripping her shoulders. Era, talk to me. She took a shaky breath. I'm okay, she whispered. He stared at her. You're… what? I'm okay. She said it louder, stronger. Lucien's hands trembled. The curse… I have it. Era pressed a hand to her chest. She could feel it. A knot of darkness coiled inside her, contained but not gone. It's inside me. But I'm still here. Lucien's face crumpled. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. You're insane, he said against her hair. Completely insane. Era laughed. It came out shaky, breathless. I know. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, just breathing. Then the door burst open. They both turned. Lord Tyron stood in the doorway, flanked by guards. His eyes landed on the bite mark on Era's throat, then on Lucien, still alive, still whole. His expression twisted into something ugly. You bonded her, he said. His voice was low, furious. Lucien stood slowly, positioning himself between Era and Tyron. That's none of your concern. It's every bit my concern. Tyron stepped into the room. You just condemned the kingdom. The moment that bond completes, you'll both be dead, and will be left with nothing. The bond is complete, Lucien said calmly, and we're still here. Tyron's face went white, then red. That's impossible. Apparently not. Tyron's gaze shifted to Era, and for the first time she saw real fear in his eyes. What are you? He whispered. Era stood. Her legs were unsteady, but she didn't let it show. I'm the queen, she said. Tyron's hand moved to his sword. Lucien's eyes narrowed. Don't. She's a witch, Tyron spat. A demon. She's corrupted the bond. She saved my life. She's going to destroy us all. The guard shifted uncomfortably behind him. Era's pulse hammered. She could feel the curse stirring inside her, reacting to the tension. Lord Tyron, she said carefully, stand down. I don't take orders from you. You do now. Tyron drew his sword. Lucien moved faster. He crossed the room in 2 strides and slammed Tyron against the wall, forearm pressed to his throat. You draw a weapon in front of your queen, Lucien said quietly, and I'll have you executed for treason. Tyrion's face went purple. The guards didn't move. Era stepped forward. Lucien, let him go. Lucien didn't. Lucien, she said again, firmer. Slowly, he released Tyron and stepped back. Tyron gasped, hand going to his throat. Era faced him. Leave, she said. Now. Tyron glared at her, hatred burning in his eyes. But he left. The guards followed. The door slammed shut. Era's knees buckled. Lucien caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you, he murmured. Era closed her eyes, heart pounding, the curse writhing inside her like a living thing, and she realized with cold certainty, this was only the beginning. Era woke to sunlight cutting through the curtains and pain radiating through her entire body. She groaned and tried to sit up. Every muscle screamed in protest. It felt like she'd been trampled by horses, then dragged behind them for good measure. Don't move, Lucien's voice. Close. She forced her eyes open. He was sitting in a chair beside the bed, elbows on his knees, watching her with an expression somewhere between exhaustion and relief. What happened? Her voice came out hoarse. You passed out, after Tyron left. You've been unconscious for 12 hours. Era blinked. 12. The curse is still inside you, Lucien said quietly. I can feel it. Through the bond. Era pressed a hand to her chest. He was right. The darkness was there, coiled tight, pulsing like a second heartbeat. It hurt, but it wasn't killing her. Not yet, anyway. How do you feel? She asked. Lucien's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Better than I have in years. She stared at him, and it was true. The pallor was gone. His hands were steady, his eyes clear. He looked alive. It worked, she whispered. It worked. He leaned forward and took her hand. You insane, reckless, impossible woman. It actually worked. Era let out a shaky laugh, then winced as pain flared in her ribs. Lucien's expression tightened. The healer's been here 3 times. He says your body's adjusting, that the curse is trying to find a way out, but you're holding it. How long will that last? He doesn't know. Lucien's grip on her hand tightened. No one's ever done this before. Era nodded slowly. Her head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. What about the court? Lucien's face darkened. Tyron's been talking, spreading rumors, saying you use dark magic, that you're dangerous. Am I? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, probably. Era huffed a weak laugh. Great. But you're also the reason I'm alive. Lucien stood and sat on the edge of the bed. And I'm not letting them take that from you. What are you going to do? Call a full assembly. Make them see the truth. His jaw set. They need to know what you are, what you did, and they need to understand that you're not the enemy. Era's chest tightened. They won't believe you. Then I'll make them. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it was pointless, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't asking for permission. He was making a promise. The assembly was called for that afternoon. Era barely had time to prepare. A servant helped her dress, a formal gown in deep blue with silver embroidery. It was heavier than anything she'd worn before. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. She stared at herself in the mirror. The bite mark on her throat was visible, dark and fresh. She'd asked the servant to cover it, but the woman had shaken her head. The king said to leave it, she'd murmured. He wants them to see. Now, standing in the corridor outside the great hall, Era understood why. The mark was proof. Proof that the bond was real. Proof that she'd survived. Proof that she wasn't just a servant playing queen. Lucien appeared at her side. He was dressed in full royal regalia, black coat, silver embroidery, the crown he rarely wore sitting heavy on his head. He looked like a king. Ready? He asked. Era's hands trembled. She clasped them together to hide it. No, she admitted. Good. He offered his arm. Neither am I. She took it. The doors opened. The great hall was packed. Every noble, every council member, every alpha with enough rank to demand a seat. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them as they entered. The silence was suffocating. Era kept her spine straight, her chin up. She didn't look at the faces. Didn't let herself see the disgust or the fear or the judgment. She just walked. Lucien led her to the dais at the front of the hall. 2 thrones sat there, his and hers. She'd never sat in hers before. Today, she did. Lucien remained standing. Thank you for coming, he said. His voice carried easily across the hall, calm, controlled. I know many of you have questions. I'm here to answer them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lord Tyron stood from his seat near the front. We have more than questions, Your Majesty. We have concerns. Then voice them. Tyrion's gaze shifted to Era. The Queen. What is she? My mate, Lucien said simply. You bonded with her. Tyron's voice was sharp. In direct defiance of the curse, in defiance of centuries of tradition. I bonded with her because she's my true mate, Lucien corrected, and because she was willing to risk her life to save mine. And what happened to the curse? Another voice called from the crowd. Lady Marin, a silver-haired alpha from the eastern provinces. The records say bonding kills both mates. Yet you stand here, alive. The curse is contained, Lucien said. Contained how? By her. The hall erupted. Voices rose in shock, disbelief, accusation. Someone shouted that it was impossible. Someone else called it witchcraft. Lucien didn't flinch. He just waited for the noise to die down. When it finally did, he spoke again. Era is a vessel, he said clearly, a bloodline ability thought to be extinct. She absorbed the curse when we bonded. It lives inside her now, contained, controlled. That's insane, Tyron spat. It's the truth. Then prove it. Lucien's eyes narrowed. How would you like me to do that? Tyron stepped forward. Let her demonstrate. If she truly has this power, let her show us. Era's stomach dropped. Lucien's hand moved to the hilt of his sword. Careful, Tyron. I'm not threatening her, Tyron said. I'm asking for proof. You claim she absorbed a curse that's killed dozens of mates over 2 centuries. If that's true, then she should be able to show us. Otherwise, this is just a convenient story. Lucien looked like he wanted to rip Tyron's throat out, but before he could speak, Era stood. Every eye in the hall turned to her. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to walk to the edge of the dais. "You want proof?" she said. Her voice was quieter than Lucien's, but it carried. Tyron's lips curled. "Yes." Era took a breath. Then she closed her eyes and reached for the curse. It was there, waiting. A coiled knot of darkness deep in her chest. She'd been holding it at bay since the bond, keeping it locked down, refusing to let it spread. Now she loosened her grip, just a little. The curse surged. Pain exploded through her body. She gasped, stumbled, caught herself on the edge of the throne. And then the room went cold. Not temperature cold, something else. A wrongness that pressed down on the air, made it hard to breathe, made the torches flicker and dim. People started backing away. Era opened her eyes. Her vision was blurred, but she could see the fear on their faces, could feel the curse leaking out of her, spreading like frost across the stone floor. "Era," Lucian's voice cut through the haze. "That's enough." She tried to pull it back, but it didn't want to go. It wanted out, wanted to consume. "Era!" She gritted her teeth and forced it down, forced it back into the void inside her. It fought, clawed, screamed. But she held. Slowly the cold receded. The torches steadied. The air cleared. Era collapsed to her knees, gasping. Lucian was there in an instant, hands on her shoulders. "I'm okay," she managed. "I'm okay." She looked up. The hall was silent. Every single person was staring at her, not with disgust, not with mockery, with fear, real, bone-deep fear. "That," Lucian said quietly, "is what she's holding, every second of every day. And she's doing it to keep me alive." No one spoke. Tyron's face had gone ashen. He took a step back. Lucian helped Era to her feet. She swayed, but he steadied her. "Anyone else have questions?" he asked. Silence. Lucian nodded once. "Good. Then this assembly is over." He turned and led Era off the dais. The crowd parted like water. They made it back to his chambers before Era's legs gave out. Lucien caught her and lowered her onto the couch by the fire. She buried her face in her hands, breathing hard, trying to calm the storm inside her. "That was stupid," Lucian said. His voice was tight, angry. "It worked. You could have lost control." "But I didn't." She looked up at him. "They needed to see. You said it yourself." "I didn't mean like that." He crouched in front of her. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "Yes, I do." Era's hands clenched. "They think I'm nothing. A fraud, a servant who got lucky. If I don't show them what I am, they'll never stop trying to remove me." Lucien's jaw worked. "And if showing them kills you?" "It won't. You don't know that." "I know I'm not running." She met his eyes. "I told you that already." Lucian stared at her. Then he let out a long breath and sat back on his heels. "You're going to be the death of me," he muttered. Era managed a weak smile. "I thought I just saved your life." "You did. And now you're going to give me a heart attack." She laughed. It hurt, but she couldn't help it. Lucien's expression softened. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair out of her face. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I got run over by a stampede." Accurate. Era leaned back against the couch. The curse had settled again, but it felt heavier now, angrier. "It doesn't like being contained," she said quietly. "Can you hold it?" "I don't know." She pressed a hand to her chest. "It's getting stronger, or maybe I'm getting weaker. I can't tell." Lucian's face tightened. "We'll find a way to stabilize it. The healer doesn't know what I am," Era interrupted. "No one does. I'm making this up as I go." "Then we'll figure it out together." She looked at him. At this man who'd rejected her in public and married her in secret, who'd pushed her away and then trusted her with his life. "Why do you believe in me?" she asked. Lucian didn't hesitate. "Because you're the only person who's ever fought for me," he said simply. "Not for the crown, not for power. Just me." Era's throat tightened. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Lucian stood. "Come in." The door opened. Corinne stepped inside, her expression unreadable. "Your Majesty," she said, "I need to speak with you, Both of you. Lucian gestured to a chair. Sit. Corinne did. She folded her hands in her lap and looked between them. The council is divided, she said bluntly. Half of them are terrified of the queen. The other half want her gone. And you? Lucien asked. Corinne's gaze shifted to Era. I want to understand. Era straightened despite the pain. Understand what? What you are. What you want. Whether you're a threat to this kingdom or its salvation. I don't want anything, Era said, except to survive. And the power you have. I didn't ask for it. But you have it, Corinne leaned forward, which means you're either the most dangerous person in this palace or the most valuable. And I need to know which. Era met her eyes. I'm not going to hurt anyone. Can you promise that? No. Era didn't look away. Because I don't know what this curse will do if I lose control. But I'm trying, every second, to keep it contained. Corinne studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. That's the most honest answer I've heard in this palace in years. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Does that mean you're on our side? It means I'm not against you. Corinne stood. But you need to move carefully. Tyron's already gathering support. He's calling for the queen to be removed, locked up, or worse. Let him try, Lucian said coldly. He has allies, powerful ones, and fear makes people do stupid things. Corinne looked at Era again. You showed them your power today. That bought you time, but it also made you a target. Era's stomach sank. What do we do? She asked. Corinne's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You survive, and you prove them wrong. That night Era couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the curse churning inside her like a living thing. It whispered, hissed, begged to be released. She clenched her fists and forced it down. Hours passed. Finally, she gave up and went to Lucian's study. He was there. Of course he was. Sitting at his desk, paper spread out in front of him, a single candle burning low. He looked up when she entered. Can't sleep? He asked. No. Neither can I. Eric crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him. What are you working on? Damage control. He gestured to the papers. Letters to the provincial lords. Assurances that the kingdom is stable. That I'm not dying. He paused. That you're not a threat. Am I? Lucian set down his pen. You're the only reason I'm alive, so no. You're not a threat. You're a miracle. Era's chest ached. I don't feel like a miracle, she said quietly. I feel like I'm drowning. Lucien stood and came around the desk. He crouched in front of her chair, the way he had earlier. Then let me help you swim, he said. Era looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, the determination. How? However you need. He reached for her hand. I'm not leaving you to do this alone. Era's breath caught. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was softer this time, slower, not desperate, just real. When they pulled apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. We're going to survive this, he murmured. How do you know? Because we don't have a choice. Era closed her eyes and let herself believe him. The next morning, the Queen Mother summoned them both. Era hadn't seen her since the night she'd revealed the truth about vessels. Part of her had hoped the old woman would just disappear, forget about her. But of course she hadn't. They climbed the tower stairs together. Lucien's hand was warm in hers. Steady. The Queen Mother was waiting in her chambers, seated by the fire, the same blanket over her lap. Sit, she said. They did. The Queen studied them both. Her pale eyes lingered on the bite mark on Era's throat, then on Lucien's steady hands. You completed the bond, she said. Yes, Lucian replied. And the curse? Contained. The Queen Mother's gaze shifted to Era. Show me. Era hesitated. Then she closed her eyes and reached for the curse. She didn't release it this time, just touched it. Let the Queen see the edges of it. The temperature in the room dropped. The Queen Mother's eyes sharpened. Then she nodded. Enough. Era pulled back. The cold receded. The Queen sat back in her chair, expression unreadable. You did well, child, she said finally. Era blinked. What? You survived. You held. You proved me right. The queen's lips twitched. Not many can say that. Lucien leaned forward. What happens now? Now? The queen mother looked at him. Now you rule. Together. And you show this court that power doesn't always come from bloodlines or titles. She looked at Era. Sometimes it comes from the ones they underestimate. Era's throat tightened. What about Tyren? Lucien asked. He's trying to remove her. The queen mother waved a hand dismissively. Tyren is a coward. He'll fall in line once he realizes she's not going anywhere. And if he doesn't? The queen's smile was thin, sharp. Then you remind him what happens to traitors. Lucien nodded slowly. The queen mother stood. You're dismissed. They left. As they descended the stairs, Era finally spoke. Did she just give us her blessing? Lucien huffed a quiet laugh. I think she did. That's unexpected. She's been waiting for this for 70 years. Lucien glanced at her. A vessel, someone who could break the curse. You're exactly what she hoped for. Era's chest felt tight. I'm not sure I can live up to that. You already have. They reached the bottom of the stairs. Lucien stopped and turned to face her. The court is going to fight us, he said. Tyren, the council, the nobles who think you don't belong. They're going to push. Hard. I know. And we're going to push back. His jaws set. Together. Era looked up at him, at this king who'd become something more than a political arrangement, something real. Together, she echoed. Lucien kissed her forehead. Then he took her hand and led her back toward the palace. And for the first time since this all began, Era felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. 2 days later, Lord Tyren made his move. He called for a vote of no confidence, a formal challenge to Lucien's authority, and by extension, to Era's place as queen. The council convened in emergency session. Era sat beside Lucien at the head of the table, hands folded, expression calm. Inside, the curse roiled. Tyren stood at the opposite end. The king has bonded with a woman of unknown origin and questionable power. This bond threatens the stability of the realm. I move that the queen be removed and the bond dissolved. You can't dissolve a true mate bond, Lucien said flatly. Then we exile her. On what grounds? On the grounds that she's dangerous. Tyren's eyes were hard. We all saw what she did in the Great Hall. That wasn't power, that was a threat. That was proof, Era said quietly. Every head turned. She stood. You wanted to know what I was, she continued. I showed you, and now you're afraid. I understand that. But fear doesn't change the truth. And what truth is that? Tyren sneered. That I'm the only reason your king is alive. Era's voice was steady, strong. That I absorbed a curse that would have killed him. That I'm holding it every second so this kingdom doesn't fall. Or you're holding it so you can use it, Tyren shot back. Against us. Era met his eyes. If I wanted to destroy you, she said quietly, I already would have. The room went silent. Tyren's face twisted. Then Corinne spoke. I vote in favor of the queen. Everyone turned to stare at her. Corinne didn't flinch. She saved the king. She proved her ability. And she's shown more courage in 3 weeks than most of us have in a lifetime. I support her. Another council member cleared his throat. As do I. Then another. And I. One by one, voices rose. Not all of them, but enough. Tyren's face went red. This is absurd. The vote is clear, Lucien interrupted. The queen stays. Tyren slammed his hand on the table. This isn't over. Yes, Lucien said coldly. It is. And if you challenge her again, I'll consider it treason. Tyren's jaw clenched. Then he turned and stormed out of the room. The remaining council members murmured among themselves. Lucien stood. This session is adjourned. They filed out. Era stayed seated, hands trembling in her lap. Lucien sat beside her. You did it. We did it. He smiled, a real one, the first she'd seen from him. We did. Era looked at him, at the man who'd become her partner, her ally. her mate. And she realized something. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen, acknowledged, accepted. Not by everyone, but by enough. And that was a start. The next 3 weeks brought a fragile kind of peace. Tyron kept his distance. The council fell into a cautious rhythm. Nobles who'd whispered behind Era's back now nodded when she passed in the halls. It wasn't respect. Not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Era spent her days learning how to be a queen. She attended council meetings, listened to provincial disputes, sat through tedious banquets. Lucienne was always at her side, teaching her the unspoken rules, the political games, the careful dance of power. At night, they returned to his chambers. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But the distance that had been there at the beginning was gone. The bond had changed things. Era could feel him now. Not his thoughts exactly, but his emotions, his moods. When he was tired, she felt it like an ache in her chest. When he was worried, it settled like a weight on her shoulders. And he felt her too. He knew when the curse was pressing hard, when the pain was too much, when she needed space or silence or just his presence. They didn't talk about it. They just learned to exist together. But the curse wasn't getting easier. If anything, it was getting worse. Era woke every morning feeling like she'd been fighting all night. Her body ached, her head pounded. The void inside her, the space where the curse lived, felt stretched too thin, like it was holding more than it was meant to. She hid it as best she could. But Lucienne noticed. One morning, she stumbled getting out of bed. He caught her before she hit the floor. "How long has it been this bad?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine." "Era." She pulled away and crossed to the window, arms wrapped around herself. "I can handle it." "You're barely standing." "I said I can handle it." Lucienne was silent for a moment. Then he moved to stand behind her, close but not touching. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I'm not alone. You're here." "That's not what I mean." He paused. "There has to be a way to ease the burden, to stabilize the curse so it's not consuming you." Era closed her eyes. "If there was, don't you think I'd have found it by now?" "Maybe you're looking in the wrong place." She turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Lucian hesitated. Then he said, "The Queen Mother. She knows more about vessels than anyone alive. Maybe she knows something we don't." Era's stomach tightened. "I don't want to go back to her." "Why not?" "Because she scares me." The admission came out before she could stop it. Lucian's expression softened. "She scares everyone." "That doesn't make me feel better." "I'll go with you." Era looked at him, at the quiet determination in his eyes, and she realized he meant it. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll go." They climbed the tower stairs that afternoon. The Queen Mother was waiting in her usual spot by the fire. She didn't look surprised to see them. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. Lucian helped Era into a chair, then stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. "The curse is getting worse," he said bluntly. "She's holding it, but it's draining her." The Queen Mother's pale eyes fixed on Era. "Show me." Era hesitated. Then she closed her eyes and reached for the curse. It surged immediately, hungry, furious. She gasped and yanked her awareness back, but not before the cold had spread through the room. The Queen Mother nodded. "It's growing." "What does that mean?" Lucian's voice was tight. "It means the curse is feeding on her fear, her doubt. The more she fights it, the stronger it becomes." Era's hands clenched. "So what am I supposed to do? Just let it take over?" "No." The Queen leaned forward. "You stop fighting it. You accept it." That doesn't make sense." "You're treating the curse like an enemy," the Queen Mother said, "like something to be contained and controlled. But it's not. It's part of you now. And the more you resist, the more it will consume you." Era's throat burned. "How am I supposed to accept something that wants to kill me?" "By understanding what it is." The Queen's voice was firm. "The curse isn't alive. It's not malicious. It's just energy. Dark energy, yes, but energy nonetheless. And energy can be redirected." "Redirected how?" "Through purpose." The Queen Mother sat back. "Right now, you're using all your strength to hold it still, to keep it locked away. But what if you gave it something to do?" Lucian frowned. Like what? Like healing. The queen looked at Era. Vessels don't just absorb darkness, they transform it. They take what would destroy and turn it into something useful. Era stared at her. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. The words were simple, but they hit like a blow. How? Era asked quietly. The Queen Mother gestured to the shelves lining the walls. The knowledge is here. Old texts, records of the last vessels. They documented their methods, their practices. She paused. But you'll need time and discipline. And most importantly, you'll need to stop being afraid of what you are. Era's chest tightened. The queen stood and crossed to a shelf. She pulled down a thin, leather-bound book and handed it to Era. Start here, she said. Era opened it carefully. The pages were brittle, the handwriting faded, but she could make out the words. A vessel is not a prison. It is a conduit. To hold darkness is to give it form. To give it form is to give it purpose. She looked up. This is the journal of the last known vessel, the Queen Mother finished. She lived 300 years ago, and she survived until she was 70. Era's breath caught. How? By learning to work with the darkness instead of against it. Lucian's hand tightened on Era's shoulder. Will this work? The Queen Mother's expression was unreadable. That depends on her. Era spent the next week buried in the journal. She read it during council meetings, during meals, late into the night when sleep wouldn't come. The words were dense, sometimes cryptic, but slowly patterns emerged. The vessel who'd written it, a woman named Lyria, had been born into a noble family. She'd discovered her ability young when she'd absorbed a plague that had been killing her village. She'd nearly died. But instead of fighting the sickness, she'd let it flow through her, let it settle. And then, instinctively, she'd redirected it into the earth. The plague had ended, and Lyria had survived. She'd spent the rest of her life learning to harness that ability, to absorb poisons, curses, dark magic, and transform them into something harmless. The key, she wrote, is not to hold, it is to release. But release must be controlled, intentional. A vessel is a river, not a dam. Era read that passage 3 times. Then she closed the journal and went to find Lucien. He was in the training yard sparring with one of the guards. Era watched from the edge until he noticed her and called a halt. What is it? He asked, crossing toward her. I need to try something, she said, and I need your help. But they went to the gardens. Quiet, private, far enough from the palace that no one would see. Era knelt in the grass, hands pressed flat to the ground. Lucien stood a few feet away, watching. What are you doing? He asked, trying to release the curse. She took a breath. The journal says vessels aren't supposed to hold darkness forever. We're supposed to transform it, redirect it. Into what? I don't know yet. She closed her eyes. But I have to try. She reached for the curse. It coiled tight in her chest, familiar and awful. She didn't fight it this time, didn't try to push it down. She just let it be. The cold spread through her body, down her arms, into her hands, and then into the earth. The grass beneath her palms withered, turned black. The soil went cold. Era gasped and yanked her hands back. What happened? Lucien was at her side immediately. Era stared at the dead patch of grass. I killed it. You released the curse? I tried. Her hands shook. But I don't know how to transform it. I just let it out, and it destroyed everything it touched. Lucien's jaw tightened. Then we'll figure it out. What if I can't? Era's voice cracked. What if all I can do is kill? Lucien took her hands. Then we find another way. But you don't give up. Era looked at him, at the certainty in his eyes, and she nodded. She tried again the next day, and the day after that. Each time, the same thing happened. The curse poured out of her and destroyed whatever it touched. Grass, flowers, even the stone beneath her hands cracked and crumbled. She couldn't control it, couldn't redirect it, and with each failure, the curse grew heavier. By the end of the second week, Era could barely get out of bed. The pain was constant, grinding. She felt like she was being crushed from the inside out. Lucien stayed with her, He didn't leave, didn't give up. But she could see the fear in his eyes. One night, she woke to him sitting beside the bed, head in his hands. "Lucienne?" Her voice was hoarse. He looked up. His eyes were red. "I can't lose you," he said quietly. Era's chest ached. "You won't. You're dying, Era. I can feel it. Through the bond. You're slipping away." She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but she couldn't because he was right. "I don't know what else to do," she whispered. Lucienne reached for her hand. "Then we go back to the Queen Mother. We ask her—" "No." Era shook her head. "She already told me what to do. I'm not strong enough." "That's not true." "It is." Tears burned her eyes. "Can't transform it. I can only destroy. And if I keep trying, I'm going to kill myself." Lucien's grip tightened, then stopped trying. She blinked. "What?" "Stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to do it exactly the way the journal says." He leaned closer. "You're not Lyria. You're not anyone else. You're you, so do it your way." Eris stared at him. Do it her way. She'd spent her entire life trying to be what other people wanted. Invisible, quiet, small. And now she was trying to be what the journal said, what the Queen Mother expected. But maybe Lucienne was right. Maybe she didn't need to be anyone else. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. I'll try. One more time. My way." Lucienne nodded. "I'll be there." They went to the gardens at dawn. The air was cold, the sky pale. No one else was awake. Era knelt in the grass. Lucienne sat beside her, close enough to touch. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know." She took a breath. "But I'm going to stop fighting." She closed her eyes and reached for the curse. It surged immediately, hungry, vicious. But this time she didn't try to control it. She just let it flow. The cold poured through her, down her arms, into the ground. The grass withered, died. But Era didn't stop. She let the curse keep going, let it spread, let it pour out of her like water from a broken dam. And then something shifted. The curse didn't stop destroying, but beneath the destruction something else was happening. New growth, tiny shoots pushing up through the dead grass, green and fragile and alive. Era's eyes flew open. The patch of dead grass was gone. In its place, new growth spread in a perfect circle. Not just grass, flowers small and white and glowing faintly in the early light. "Era!" Lucien's voice was breathless. She stared at her hands. They were shaking, but the pain was less. Not gone, but manageable. "I did it," she whispered. "How?" "I stopped trying to control it." Era looked at him. "I just let it go." And something else came through. Lucienne pulled her into his arms. "You're incredible." Era let out a shaky laugh. "I'm exhausted." "That too." They sat there for a long moment, surrounded by new growth, the curse finally at peace inside her. And Era felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. The change didn't go unnoticed. Within days, servants were whispering about the flowers that had appeared overnight in the gardens, about the queen who'd been seen kneeling in the grass at dawn. The council noticed too. At the next meeting, Corinne spoke up. "Your Majesty," she said, addressing Era directly, "there are reports of unusual growth in the palace gardens." Era met her eyes. "Yes." "Did you cause that?" "Yes." Murmurs rippled through the room. "How?" Tyron demanded. He'd been silent for weeks, but now his voice was sharp, accusing. Era didn't flinch. "I learned to redirect the curse. Instead of just holding it, I'm transforming it." "Into what?" "Life." The word hung in the air. Tyron's face went red. "That's impossible." And yet it happened. Lucien's voice was calm, final. "The queen has found a way to not only survive the curse, but to harness it. She's proven herself. Again." Tyron opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no argument left. Corinne leaned forward. "If you can truly transform the curse," she said slowly, "then you're not just a vessel. You're something more. Era's throat tightened. I'm just trying to survive. No. Corinne shook her head. You're changing what it means to be powerful. The words settled over the room, and for the first time, Era saw something other than fear in the council's eyes. She saw respect. 2 months later, the kingdom held a formal coronation. Era had been queen in name since the wedding, but this was different. This was acknowledgement, acceptance. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall. Every noble, every provincial lord, every alpha of rank attended. Era stood at the center of the dais, dressed in silver and white, the crown heavy on her head. Lucian stood beside her. His hand was warm in hers. The officiant spoke the traditional words. The crowd repeated them, and when it was done, the hall erupted in applause. Not polite applause, real, thunderous noise. Era looked out at the sea of faces. Some still held doubt, some still held fear, but most held something else. Hope. After the ceremony, Lucien led her to the balcony overlooking the city. They stood together looking out at the light spreading below. How does it feel? He asked. Era considered. Strange, good, terrifying. Lucian laughed. Sounds about right. She leaned against him. Do you think they'll ever fully accept me? Some will, some won't. He wrapped an arm around her. But it doesn't matter. You've already proven who you are. Era looked up at him. And who's that? The queen who broke a curse that ruled for generations. He smiled. The woman who saved a dying king. The vessel who turned darkness into life. Era's chest tightened. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. Lucien's expression was serious, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Era turned and kissed him, soft, slow, full of everything she couldn't put into words. When they pulled apart, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. Era's breath caught. It was the first time he'd said it. I love you too, she whispered. They stood there together, wrapped in each other, the city spread out below them. And Era realized something. She'd spent her whole life invisible, trying to disappear, trying to be nothing. But now she was seen. Not because of a crown or a title or a bloodline, but because she'd fought, she'd survived. She'd chosen to stay when it would have been easier to run, and in doing so, she'd become something she'd never imagined. A queen, a vessel, a force that had changed the kingdom forever. 3 years later, Era stood in the same gardens where she'd first learned to release the curse. The flowers had spread. What had started as a small circle now covered half the grounds, white blooms glowing faintly in the moonlight, a permanent reminder of what she'd become. Lucien found her there, just as he had so many times before. Can't sleep? He asked. No, just thinking. He sat beside her in the grass. About what? Everything. She looked at him. About how different my life is now. Better or worse? Era smiled. Better. Definitely better. Lucien leaned over and kissed her temple. Good. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Era spoke again. Do you ever think about what would have happened if the Queen Mother hadn't named me that night? Lucien considered. I'd probably be dead. And you'd probably be gone. Disappeared somewhere quiet. Would that have been better? No. He didn't hesitate. Us, it's exactly what was supposed to happen. Era leaned against him. You really believe that? I do. She closed her eyes and let herself believe it too. The curse was still there. It would always be there. But it no longer controlled her. She'd learned to live with it, to work with it, to turn it into something beautiful. And in the process, she'd found something she'd never expected. A home, a purpose, a love that had grown from necessity into something real and unshakable. The court had changed too, slowly. Not everyone accepted her. Tyrants still glared when she passed. A few nobles still whispered. But most had come around. They'd seen what she could do. Seen the flowers, seen the king, alive and whole, seen the kingdom stabilize under their joint rule. And they'd realized something. Power didn't always come from bloodlines or titles or ancient rights. Sometimes it came from the ones no one expected. The servants, the outcasts, the ones who'd learned to survive in the shadows. Era had been all of those things, and now she was something else entirely. A queen who'd ended a curse that had ruled for generations. A woman who'd turned darkness into life. A vessel who'd proven that even the most broken things could become whole. She opened her eyes and looked at Lucian. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me, when no one else did." Lucian's expression softened. "You made it pretty hard not to." Era laughed. "I really didn't. Maybe not at first." He took her hand. "But you do now." They stood together and walked back toward the palace. Hand in hand, king and queen, mates, partners. The windows glowed with warm light. The halls echoed with life. The kingdom spread out beyond the walls, vast and thriving. And Era, once invisible, once nothing, was finally home. Years later, when historians wrote about the reign of King Lucien Varec and Queen Ericalin, they spoke of the curse that was broken. The vessel who saved the kingdom, the flowers that grew where death had once spread. They wrote about the reforms, the alliances, the prosperity. But they also wrote about something else, about a servant girl who became a queen, not through birthright or conquest, but through courage, through choice, through refusing to disappear when the world told her she should. And in every version of the story, one thing remained constant. She'd been underestimated, dismissed, cast aside, until the moment she proved them all wrong. From forgotten servant to the queen who changed everything. That was Era's story. And it was just the beginning.